Welcome to the High Ground Podcast. I'm CBW.
And Callum.
Today we're looking at Bruce Lee. We're celebrating Chinese New Year as of recording, which was last Friday as of recording. So Gong Xi Fa Kai. And so we're celebrating the life of the man, the myth, the legend that is Bruce Lee. So
Probably the most famous Chinese person ever.
yes. And
Or American, isn't he, really?
yeah, he's mixed cultural, really.
Yeah.
And so what was your first introduction to Bruce Lee?
Oh God. I think my nan. My nan has a lot of these origin stories for how I get into films. But yeah, no, she always used to describe like Enter the Dragon to me. I think it was, and I used to think because it was obviously I was growing up when Mortal Kombat came out. So I thought, well, that sounds really similar to Mortal Kombat minus like the gore and stuff. So when I finally did get to watch it, like I was blown away. Like I had to go and find all the rest of his films as well. And I remember back then you could get the box set with VHS versions of the film, and on each spine it formed a picture of Bruce Lee.
Oh, nice.
And I was well proud of having that. So yeah, I think that was my first introduction. What about you?
So yeah, to me, everybody knows. I'm a product of the '80s, so Bruce Lee was named. You know him as a martial arts star, but it was really Brandon Lee, Showdown in Little Tokyo, and then of course Rapid Fire and The Crow. So it's sort of like I always knew that as Bruce as being Brandon's father, and this great martial artist. And it wasn't until a few years later that I actually started watching his movies. Because, and in the time when Brandon was around, with especially with Showdown in Little Tokyo, is when you got the Van Dams and the Segals were all. It's like the little renaissance of kung fu martial arts. So it's sort of like, and every one of them, does hark back to Bruce Lee. So Bruce Lee was always been in the consciousness, but it's sort of like as actually watching his films, it was a few years after that. So you're looking late '90s for me.
Yeah.
So because I really, it's like these like martial arts does go. It's like a little. There are fads. There are like I can see it coming around, the martial arts genre coming around again with the success of Cobra Kai. Everybody looking into it, but Bruce Lee has always been big. Yes,
yeah.
So yeah,
I think you can even see like if you go into the 80s, it's when you start getting more martial arts films arising. I think even something like The Karate Kid. It's not really like a the same sort of martial arts film, but it's like the martial arts as a sports film, and you had people like Sonny Chiba was the 70s as well, wasn't he? But is it start to get women as well? Like is it
Cynthia Rothrock.
Yeah, that's it. Rothrock. I'm trying to think of her name there. And things like Ninja the Domination. Everything was Ninja in the 80s, wasn't it?
Yeah. Straight to video with the US market, they would churn them out literally multiple ones a year. I mean, I watched this morning. I watched a fantastic documentary on Netflix, Iron Fists and Kung Fu Kicks, which traces the history from the 70s to present day. And it was fascinating, Shaw Brothers and Golden Harvest and the dubbing and everything like that. And it touches on the 90s and the Americanization and everything that came after Bruce Lee's death.
Yeah.
So, and how Bruce Lee went over and changed kung fu movies from being the whole wire work and the fantastical operatic to more of a realism.
Yeah, I mean, there was a phase, wasn't there, in the early 2000s, late 90s, where it was all the ballet kind of martial arts films, like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and House of Flying Daggers and stuff like that, and Hero as well, obviously.
Yeah, but that all started from like The Matrix.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, The Matrix is another one of those sort of like the renaissance of martial arts films, wasn't it? Unintentionally, I think.
Yeah. And this does all stem back to what Bruce brought to the American culture.
Yeah,
And even though
100%.
he was passed over with his idea for Kung Fu the series, which went to David Carradine.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. They had to train him. They had to train him up. He's not a Kung Fu. Didn't know martial arts, and they had to
I mean,
train
I
him up.
always assumed he was because of the show, but
Yeah.
I didn't realize he wasn't trained before either.
No, it's and he actually pitched the idea, got rejected, but they did it anyway with a more Caucasian looking actor.
So weird, isn't it? I mean, there's another weird little connection there as well because Quentin Tarantino always said if Bruce Lee had lived, he would have been Bill, which is a strange little connection.
Yeah,
David Carradine went on to play him.
I always thought Bruce Lee would have been perfect as Pai Mei.
I thought, yeah, he probably would have done a double. Because, I mean, the guy that plays Pai Mei is in the first part as well, isn't he?
Yeah, one of the crazy 88s, isn't he? The head of the crazy 88s. So, which we will be touching on Quentin Tarantino. I know that. I actually watched. I mean, there's if you want the history of Bruce Lee, I mean, there's it's out there. It's on YouTube and everything, and
yeah, there's so much.
And books. The amount of writing there is. I mean, I actually have the Tao of Kung Fu. I bought that when I was going through my little bit of a martial arts thing in the 2000s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
It's but I actually watched for the first time Green Hornet, an episode of the Green Hornet.
Oh, the original series.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seemed to be like like a more mature version of the Batman, which I know it was a spin-off from Batman, but I couldn't get into it. I thought that it was before Bruce Lee was a star, and you're watching, and this guy eats up the screen. I don't care about everybody else. I don't care about the story. I just want to see Bruce Lee at a good camera angle, kicking someone's ass rather than, And I've seen clips of the Batman episode. So clips of the Batman episode and the high angles and everything, and it's just Bruce Lee goes like, my God, you've got all these people there, and you've got Bruce Lee. Who cares about Batman, Robin, and when the scene where he's fighting, I saw him fighting Robin, and I'm going, come on, Kato, would you want to see more Kato?
I know, it's a little bit sort of hokey, isn't it, when you compare it to, like, his films often have, like, quite mature background, like, backstories, don't they, like, to do with, like, gangsters and stuff like that, and it's just so weird watching. Yeah, it's very much in the vein of Batman, isn't it?
Yeah. I really wanted to enjoy it, but I can't. It was a hard watch. When you find reaching for your phone to do more research, I was use that as I go like, nah. I like find something. I was like, got it on. I'm like, find something else that's more relevant. But it's I mean, we are going to touch on the films, but how he was a child star because of his father, and that whole love of films, which I mean, he was a natural film director. I mean, when you look at Way of the Dragon, and how beautifully that's shot, and some of the scenes that he actually shot for Enter the Dragon, it's he knew framing, he knew all the elements, what worked, which made him more than just your standard kung fu star goes on just goes on there and does his work. He knew how to frame everything where the cameras were.
Yeah, because I mean, if I'm not mistaken, he choreograph everything as well himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, like, you'd be the perfect person to do that. I actually think Way of the Dragon is probably the best one outside of Enter the Dragon.
For years, I've always said that my one was Fist of Fury, and I do like Fist of Legend, the Jet Li version. But after watching it again, watching all these movies, I agree. I think Way of the Dragon is superb. But there's a few things that niggled me about Fist of Fury, watching this for the first time after a few years, which I will go on to when we look at that one. So might as well start with the start. We'll look at his cinematic career, starting with The Big Boss.
Yeah, but that's probably the one I saw last, actually. Funnily enough, because I mean, there's no real order. I mean, if you want to watch them in order from when they came out, you can. But I think I sort of watched them out of order. But yeah, no, that's the one with the ice, isn't it?
Yes.
Where they get chopped up. Yeah. I really like Big Boss. I think the fight at the end is really good, isn't it? With
Yeah.
him? But I think it was called something else, wasn't it? Wasn't it called? Wasn't it actually called Fist of Fury?
Yeah,
Which fucked up Fists of Fury coming up.
it's see, this is where yeah, because there was that, and they had to change all the names around the Big Boss. Let me just I remember the good old days when you had to use Hollywood's Film Guide to find out this sort of information. Original
Yeah, now
title.
we can just click a button.
Yeah, original. It says on IMDb, original title is Tang Shan Da Zong,
Oh, I'm sure one
the
of
Big
them was
Boss.
swapped around.
I
Like
think
Fist
it
of
was.
Fury wasn't called. Oh, I can't remember what
I
it was now.
do think the boss, well, the Big Boss was Fist of Fury, and Fist of Fury. What we know is Fist of Fury was the Chinese connection,
That's it. Yeah,
and
yeah.
Way of the Dragon wasn't that Return of the Dragon? Because it was
Yeah,
released
it's
after
something.
Enter the Dragon.
It's to do with like they do it with Jet Li. Some of Jet Li's films, not Jet Li, yeah, Jackie Chan. There's a film called Armor of God, and they never released the first one in America first. They released the second one first. So when they re-released the original in America, it was Armor of God 2, even though it was the first one. There's some weird like title conventions to do with the foreign market because they obviously just release it when they get it.
Yeah. Something becomes. It's like even in the 70s, like it is today, when something becomes big, the big studios want to get hold of, and the distributors want to get hold of as much as they can.
Yeah.
And as soon as Bruce Lee did The Big Boss, which was an overnight success in the States, sorry, not in the States, in China, the Americans starts keeping track, and then of course you got Fist of Fury, and it's like literally they want him back, even though it's like he was someone that was all but forgotten about after Green Hornet was cancelled, and you couldn't. But then again, it was a race thing back at the time. You had to appeal to the Caucasian market. That's why even when it came to Enter the Dragon, you've still got that three main star dynamic, so that it isn't an Asian that's carrying the film.
Yeah.
But which is kind of crazy when you think about it today, because now people like Donnie Yen or Jet Li or Jackie Chan open pictures on their own.
Yeah, I mean, Donnie Yen's even like in the Western sort of world now, isn't he? With like Rogue One and Mulan and things like that. I mean, it's quite a shame that they have to sort of, because it's made for like you say, the American Caucasian market. They have to sort of break out there instead of. I mean, it's getting better. Like a lot of them, something like Ip Man.
Yeah,
that's probably, I would say, his breakout performance.
Definitely.
And it's kept in its original sort of. It's not dubbed or anything like that. So yeah, I think it's getting better. But back in the 70s and the early 80s, it was definitely, there was no chance unless they released it in the States first, was there really?
Yeah. So go to Donnie Yen. I mean, he when he was announced for Rogue One, I was like, yes, Donnie Yen.
Yes, I
was like, you know what, this doesn't matter if this had been if Rogue One had been a terrible film, it would still mean that Donnie Yen is in a Star Wars film, and to me, that is one of the coolest bits of casting in the modern Star Wars films. That, and along with Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian, which to me, those two just ooze off the screen. But and that's all possible because of Bruce.
Yeah.
It's and I mean it's weird to even think that because Bruce in China was an unproven commodity. I mean he was known because when it was exported, the Green Lantern, the Green Hornet, the Green Lantern is known as Shite Anywhere, unless of course you listen to our podcast, which was still one of the ones we've done, In Defense of Green Lantern. That's one plug for us. Green Hornet was known as the Kato Show from Right.
Oh, right, I didn't know that.
Well, that's what the audience said. It was because Kato was the, of course, because he translates over. He does. I'm just looking at my notes about something that hit me, and this is and this is one thing that I think it's cool anyway. You look at the scene where Bruce is eating rice with chopsticks.
Yeah.
Because I was I'm a very picky eater, and when I was starting, eating Chinese food, and rice was always the thing, and I'm traditionalist. I eat with chopsticks, and watching The Big Boss was how I learned how to actually eat rice with chopsticks.
Oh, I've always failed with chopsticks, so I really do want to try though.
It's an art, and I love it. I mean, I'm sorry, it doesn't matter if I go to a restaurant or anywhere, I do, and it was watching The Big Boss is actually the reason why I know how to eat rice. So thank you, Bruce. But yeah. So what?
Big Boss is probably the one I actually don't remember the most. Not out of because it's bad or anything like that. I mean, the fight sequences are still perfect, but it's just I think it's the one I've seen the least amount of times. I don't know if you about you.
I completely agree with. I do completely agree with that. I mean, it it doesn't lack. I know this is going to sound really weird because of watching watching a documentary on Enter the Dragon, the Curse of the Dragon, which will completely contradict what I say. But to me, it seems like his least confident film because it's sort of like it's like this is Bruce Lee at the start, and even though that I know from watching like stuff from Curse of the Dragon that he wasn't at the start of filming of Enter the Dragon, he wasn't that confident. But it actually feels like it with The Big Boss because it just doesn't. And I know he was second fiddle to, was it James Tian?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
And they changed it when they got the dailies back that it would be James Tian's character that got killed off, not Bruce's, so because he had that presence, and it's quite graphic. The chopping people up, sticking. Sorry, you haven't seen a Bruce Lee film. I just turn off, watch them, and come back because we are going to be loading this for spoilers. Pause. That's it. I'll go back, and yeah. So it does seem to me. I know in terms of like some of the things that they do, that is the most violent.
yeah. I think like it's probably the most gruesome one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like they don't really get much more gruesome than that. I don't think. I mean, and if you watch it now, like whatever people are used to now, it's probably quite tame, but it is still like I mean, for the time, if you consider it for just a martial arts plot, it's still quite sort of grisly, isn't it?
Yeah. An outsider. Bruce likes to play the outsiders coming into a town.
He does, yeah.
Who's made a promise on a jade pendant not to fight. He made the promise to his mother and his family. Yeah. So he keeps pushing and pushed, watching all this stuff till he has to break that sacred vow to his mother. So he has to fight, and it's
I really have to wonder if when Clint Eastwood made Unforgiven, if he was sort of unconsciously channeling that story, because that's exactly the same, isn't it? You know, like this guy that's pacifist now, and he gets pushed so far that he has to break his promise. You know, it seems like the same plot, basically.
Come on, it's not the first time Western cinema's stolen from.
No, definitely not.
No, Star Wars. One Star Wars reference, we got it in. Yeah, but it's you got the start of it, which is the no, I don't want to fight, God, stay out of trouble, abide by the rules. Then breaking the rules, which it's and the ending when he crosses the line and he literally goes into battle and basically he becomes a murderer. I know they're bad people, but he still murders them. Some of it, and the police arrive at the end. It's sort of like saying that you are going to pay. You became, in essence, you're doing what's wrong, and two wrongs don't make a right. So he has to be taken away by the police, and it's not really a happy ending when you think about it. He's trying to do.
It's quite downbeat.
Yeah, he's trying to do what's right. And doing what's right does have consequences. So, you could argue that the film does go against some of his philosophies. But in the end, it does go back that any action you does have there's always another reaction to your actions. So if you go down the violent path for the right reasons, you're still doing the wrong path, which will ultimately lead to no good coming to you.
Yeah.
It's a very weird thing. It is. It's like a lot of times, the good guy will take out the bad guys, murder them, kill them, and there are no consequences. But this show does. In this, there is consequences.
Yeah, it's almost. I mean, a lot of people sort of criticize the Bruce Lee's films for being sort of simplistic and just, fighting and that. But there is quite a few. I mean, I never considered that until you just said that. Like, I mean, that's quite deep, isn't it?
Yeah.
For what's just a simple action fighting film.
I mean, listen, this not in the last 7 days I've been literally watching and reading so much. So and I read something literally after I made some of my notes about how the ending one of it, Game of Death. I think there's a few endings because Hong Kong cinemas has to show for his reaction, for his actions, he has something bad that has to happen to him because of the culture. That you're breaking the rules and stuff. And I mean, I'd already noticed that through, especially through Fist of Fury, which we'll go into, and I'll elaborate more when we go on to it. But it's when I saw that on about Game of Death. I think this might have been on IMDb where I read this. It does fit in with all of his films.
Yeah.
All of his Shaw Brothers, Golden Harvest, Hong Kong films. It does come across that his actions, there are consequences to his actions. So, yeah.
I think Game of Death is sort of overshadowed by the fact that he died. So it seems like two different movies, doesn't it? When you watch it, I mean, you've got the sort of the dojo with all the different levels where he fights Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, is it?
It is, yes.
Yeah, and then you've got like the stupid plot line they came up with to cover up the fact that he died. So it's quite a weird mixed bag of a film, isn't it, really?
7 minutes out of 30 minutes they could have used. They couldn't do a story and they couldn't get the rest back.
Yeah.
But we will go on to...
we have to leave that till we go on to it.
Yeah, because that's going to be an interesting one. So, Fist of Fury.
See, that's one I remember more. That's like a sort of traditional Bruce Lee plot, isn't it? Where his teacher's killed, isn't he? And I think isn't it the Japanese that are doing it?
Sick Man of Asia.
Yeah, and it's that I'm sure that little fella out of Way of the Dragons in it, isn't he?
He is. He's the interpreter.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. Fist of Fury is that fight at the end in the dojo is fantastic, isn't it? In the garden, sorry, not the dojo.
The Bushido versus Kung Fu.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's something that will come up in each film, but it's just the choreography just seems perfect, doesn't it?
Oh, it's superb.
Like it's not so much sort of opponent versus opponent, but mindset versus mindset. Like you say with Bushido versus Kung Fu, and it is way more philosophical than everyone gives it credit for, isn't it?
This is I tell you, it's the whole Japanese versus China and the occupation. This is very political.
It is, yeah. I mean, because if anyone's not aware, like they do have a sort of antagonism towards each other, don't they?
Yeah. And there's a scene where Bruce wants to in Hong Kong wants to go through the park. He can't because it's no Chinese and no dogs, and there's a woman with a dog walking through, and they won't let him go through unless he's on a lead. It's very and the thing is, the guy that's guarding the park is Indian, but it's obviously been done with brown face.
Yeah,
I was like, wow, this is like
it's kind of like sort of almost like a Chinese civil rights thing, isn't it?
Yes.
The fact that they're not allowed in certain places,
It just amused me in a bad way that they had this Chinese actor,
Played in India.
like what they do in America at that time.
Yeah, I know, it's so bad. And when you watch these older films, there are some like questionable decisions, aren't there, with things like that?
But when you see it other countries, it's like, oh, it's not just the Americans that do this.
No, it's everyone.
There's one of the fight scenes, where Bruce goes to the dojo of the karate lot the first time with the sign.
Yeah.
And he's surrounded by them all. And all that was going through my head when I was watching that was the music from Kill Bill, just as the bride taking out all the crazy 88s. I was like, that was pure homage.
Yeah, you can see how much like creeps into that film, can't you, from Bruce Lee? I mean, he literally beats up the whole room, doesn't he?
Yeah.
And it's basically the same thing. I mean, he doesn't chop them up or anything like that, but the concept is the same, isn't it?
And he makes them eat their words.
Yeah.
And the thing is, and this is one thing, because I've always thought for years this was my favourite one of his. But looking back, looking at it now, I think he's a bit of a psychopath in it, because he goes the way he kills people. It's not like he does it, but it's sort of like he becomes the villain.
Yeah.
There's revenge, and then there's revenge, and that was all out revenge, like leaving people hanging.
Yeah, on the lampposts.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like you say before though. I always think it's sort of he's getting pushed so far that the only way to fight back is to become like the bad guys, basically, isn't it? I mean, it doesn't go to the certain extremes in the other films. Like, I don't think he kills that many people in Way of the Dragon, does he? Only was it Chuck Norris, just maybe?
And no one else before Chuck Norris.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, but it's always like he's defending himself, isn't he? Whereas, yeah, in Fist of Fury, he is a bit of a psychopath.
Rather than calling the cops, what we'll do is we have enough evidence about the poison. No, I'm just going to go ahead and kill them all.
Yeah, screw it. Bruce Lee justice.
Yeah, and the look on his face as he does it, his expressions, it's like he's getting all his anger out.
Yeah.
Which again, like with Big Boss, goes to the ending where there's a realization to save the school. He knows he's done wrong. So what he's going to have to do is sacrifice himself. And so when you see the last shot, and he's going out and you hear the gun, and you hear all the guns shooting at him, it's like, that's the only thing they could have. That's the only ending really they could have had.
Yeah.
Because it would have all escalated and escalated and escalated.
Yeah, and then he would have become what he was fighting against.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the first two films, they're like warnings, aren't they, really, about how to pursue justice and stuff like that.
Yeah, because martial arts for defense only, whereas he's crosses the line and he uses it for attack.
Yeah.
It's like when he goes to the Japanese karate school. He's out for a fight.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, he's not sort of. It's not them coming to his dojo and kicking off, is it? It's like he wants revenge.
Yeah.
Yeah, most of I think I don't know, but Way of the Dragon, it's mostly like defense, isn't it? A lot of the time because he's trying to help the restaurant, but a lot of his other films seem sort of he's taking the fight to them.
Yeah.
With the exception, he's supposed to be a spy in the Dragon, isn't he? So that's a bit more sort of Western plot. But yeah, it's all they're always usually gangsters, aren't they? Usually in the earlier films.
But you'd also argue that with Fist of Fury, he's showing that the Chinese are not the weak men of Asia. That they can kick ass if they want to.
Yeah.
No, not weak man, sick man of Asia. But
I
Well,
didn't
yeah.
realise all that sort of political stuff when I was younger. You know, when you're younger, you're watching it, you sort of just, you are there for the action, aren't you? But that stuff's in the background. I mean, I wouldn't have ever picked up on that when I was younger
No.
until I was a bit more wise of the world.
I mean, like
And it's
Robocop.
all sort of there, isn't it, if you want it?
Like Robocop
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
or Starship Troopers.
Yeah.
Or Star Wars Phantom Menace.
Or Blade Runner.
Oh, yeah. Way of the Dragon, then. Written, directed, and pretty much everything else done by Bruce Lee, including
Yeah,
casting his
and
friends.
you can tell as well, can't you?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
I think before Enter the Dragon, it's like the perfect film, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's. I mean, again, Bruce playing an immigrant in a strange land.
Yeah.
You know, it is a thread that goes through the Chinese movies. Setting it in Rome. Well, the thing I did notice is the white characters are very blaxploitation cinema.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite strange, isn't it? When you listen to the dubs, you obviously know that's not the original person's voice,
Yeah.
but yeah, it does sort of, it feels very blaxploitation, doesn't it, actually?
White guys, the bad guys. So, and really, it didn't have that whole, Foxy Brown,
Yeah,
and Shaft vibe to it.
yeah.
So,
It's nice to see, it was nice to see something set outside of China as well.
yeah.
I mean, it's set in Rome, isn't it? So it's nice to see them sort of try somewhere different, because a lot of those films are all set in Asia, aren't they, usually?
Yeah. What about the, in James Bond, Diamonds Are Forever, there is hinted at the homosexual henchman, but
Yeah.
but it is actually quite prominent in Way of the Dragon.
Yeah, it's also funny as well because I think Bruce is totally unaware of the fact that this guy's gay, isn't he?
Yeah,
At first.
and it is actually. I thought that was an interesting touch to it.
Yeah, especially for the 70s.
Oh yeah. Again, it's like saying, well, why can't I know it was a camp stereotype, but it's like saying, well, why can't we have a henchman be gay? I thought it was a good little touch. The double nunchuck scene where Bruce is fighting the bad guys, bringing his trademark weapon to the forefront.
Yeah, see, there's an interesting story behind that actually, because well, for me anyway, because when I saw it on video, that scene was cut out. Like he has the nunchucks, but he doesn't do the whole demonstration with them. And my dad had seen that in cinema at some point over here when it came out, and he said, "I'm sure there was a whole scene where he does like a demonstration with them." And I was like, "Oh well, there's nothing on here." And then when I got it on DVD later, finally, I saw it's the same with the Dragon as well. There's a scene that they cut out, didn't they? Because I think there was a spate of people going around sort of hurting themselves with nunchucks, wasn't there?
Yeah, it's
Trying to copy it.
yeah, it became a banned weapon in film.
Oh, is it still?
In film.
No, is it still a banned weapon? Like,
I mean, it was banned in films. You could always get nunchucks.
oh right, I see. Yeah.
I remember in the early '90s going around Leicester, and there was a martial arts shop, and I'd be looking at the nunchucks thinking, they're cool. That's what Michelangelo that uses them in Turtles.
Yeah.
You know, when you look at something, you think, that's so cool, I want them, and you never get around to getting them. And it's like, if anyone really wants to gift us some real nunchucks, feel free.
I mean, we probably can't use them very well, but they just look cool, don't they?
Yeah. Not that I've been looking at them lately or anything, but you'd see them and it's like, it's so cool. So, yeah.
I really love that scene with the nunchucks because it's the first time he plays like a sort of guy that doesn't want to fight again, doesn't he? In Way of the Dragon, it's just cool when you see like these bad guys sort of beating the hell out of these fellas in the restaurant, and he's like, isn't there some guy that says like, show me Chinese boxing or kung fu or something, and he's like, no, you don't want to see it. And then he finally sort of shows them, and you think, wow.
He's the reluctant insurance policy that the uncle sends over to the restaurant.
Yeah.
And it's because you got all the kitchen staff learning, even though the Chinese, they're learning Japanese karate.
Yeah.
And because it's better than Chinese boxing.
Yeah.
And so, but you have to have the others getting their asses kicked before they actually appreciate Bruce's style of kung fu.
Yeah. Because there's always has to be that thing that pushes him to help, isn't there?
Yeah. But the nunchucks of that guy just picks them up, and you just try to use them, and then Bruce doing all his. Which, if I'm right,
it's mesmerizing to watch, isn't it? Like, I mean, I don't know if I heard a rumor once, and I don't know if it's true or whether you can clear it up, but I've heard that they have to slow the film down when he's fighting sometimes because he's so fast. I don't know if that's true or not.
Jet Li, I think they did that with Lethal 4. Bruce, they just told him to slow. They just told him to slow down.
Oh right.
Because everything was going, they couldn't capture it on film, so they had to slow. He had to slow down.
Yeah. Because I mean, if you watch some of the sparring footage, it's just can't believe what you see in a lot of time, can you?
But you can tell it's not sped up. Because there's the thing that really, I mean, not mentioning any names, Steven Seagal. Is when you're watching a lot of his scenes, you can tell it's a double, especially in his later work. And I can't stand, I can't stand films, and it's my biggest cinematic bugbear. Is you can tell when something's been sped up, and I hate it. I can't. If you can't do something, don't do it. Don't speed the film up. It looks ridiculous. It does. I can't stand that. That's my one major cinematic bugbear. I hate it when they speed film up. But Bruce, it's they had to slow down to get you on film. But it's.
I mean, I even think that's maybe where the slow motion comes in handy, isn't it? Because you can it looks cool and you can slow it down as well, so we can see every single move.
Yeah.
I can only imagine that he came up with that in the choreography.
Yeah.
To sort of say, do this scene slower so everyone can see what I'm doing.
See how great I am. They're all there. I mean, Big Boss, Fist of Fury, and Way of the Dragon were calling cards for the Hollywood movies.
Yeah.
So, but interesting. It's set in Chinese New Year as well when he goes over.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And before he gets to fight Chuck Norris, which we will go into, he's fighting Robert Wall, who will also appear in.
Yes.
He's one of his mates. This is what I love, and this is absolutely fantastic. Is that he hires mates, and it's like his students to be in his films.
Yeah, because I mean, but who would know it better than them? I mean, Robert Wall's in quite. Is he not? He's in Enter the Dragon as well, isn't he?
He is.
And I'm sure he's in. Is he in any of the other ones, or is it just those two?
I think he's also in. Don't quote me on that. He might be in. What's it called? Game of Death.
Yeah, I think he is actually. Yeah.
But that might be just in stuff that they actually use, because there's a lot of we'll go to Game of Death. There's a lot of stuff that they just stole from these other films.
Yeah.
Just so that they could pad it out. But Chuck Norris, I mean, this is the big deal. Is you got Chuck Norris, who trained with Bruce. He was known for judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, taekwondo, and karate. That's just to name a few of them. I mean, he's versus Kung Fu Jeet Kune Do. And there's an interesting thing how at the start of the fight, Bruce is getting his ass handed to him by by Chuck Norris, and there's a cat. The hare is watching him, the whole cat in the scene, and
Yeah.
adapting. He has to adapt. Bruce makes his comeback when he adapts his fighting style rather than staying rigid to one form. He adapts like an MMA fighter would to take on all martial arts rather than saying I'm going to fight in one form. And that's how he wins.
Yeah.
And it follows his philosophy about martial arts being ever evolving, which is his Jeet Kune Do.
I absolutely love that fight. I think, like you say with the cat, when it keeps cutting back, like the cat's watching, and just the setting as well. Like, I mean, it does feel like they're two gladiators going
Yeah.
at it, don't they? Of their respective fighting forms. And I think it's the first time you sort of see Bruce get knocked on his ass as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like properly. Because I mean, Chuck Norris was at the top of his game then, wasn't he? Like he was like a black belt world champion, wasn't he? And
Oh yes.
I think I get the feeling that Bruce sort of respects him quite a lot.
Yeah.
And you can tell him, like, even when he's forced to kill him, he sort of puts his jacket over him, doesn't he, as a sign of respect? And he doesn't do that very often in his films with his opponents, does he?
No, that's it. It's a form of respect. It's like he didn't want to kill him, but he has to kill him, and it was all, obviously it is Bruce's vehicle. Bruce was going to win, and Chuck Norris played the bad guy, so he has to pay.
Yeah.
And but it is two gladiators in the Colosseum having a fight, and it's perfection. It's what Bruce and Chuck Norris doing what they do best, and the scene's perfect.
Yeah. I'd probably say it's the best fight scene actually that he ever did
Definitely.
in his films. I think. I mean, I used to sort of be the Dragon was I still feel like it's my favorite film, but it doesn't have as good a fight scene at the end as Way of the Dragon. I mean, both opponents are matched perfectly, aren't they? Rather than just some old guy with a metal claw.
Yeah, I've got so many theories about that film, but which we will go on to. But
yeah,
it's perfect storytelling, and that scene alone it tells a story within the film. It does,
yeah.
and it's perfection, and yeah, and that's the one.
It's almost like a sort of East versus West, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like a Rocky IV kind of the Battle of the Giants kind of thing, isn't it?
My Jeet Kune Do versus your karate.
Yeah, essentially.
Which you'd also argue is also Japan versus China.
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, it's not really West, is it? Yeah,
it's still a similar sort of thing.
Like we say, though, isn't it? It's always the ideologies that are fighting rather than the opponents themselves, in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, and plus the fact that Chuck Norris's character had been paid off to kick his ass.
Yeah.
But I didn't see the ending coming, with Uncle being the one that betrays them.
Oh yeah, I hate the uncle. He's a right arsehole, isn't he?
And again, the cops arrive at the end, don't they?
Yeah, and they actually shoot the bad guys this time, don't they?
Yeah. But Bruce is still standing there with blood on his hand, which again goes into the whole thing about consequences for actions.
Yeah, and responsibilities. There is a really funny scene in The Way of the Dragon, actually, near the part with the prostitute.
Yeah.
It still makes me laugh to this day because he just looks so like clueless, doesn't he?
Yeah.
About what to do, and I always think like he injects the films with humor as well, doesn't he? Like that there are really funny parts that actually do make you laugh.
But he was innocent. He was innocent abroad.
Yeah.
And he comes across as that. I mean, the other ones, of course, he had, not so. The big boss, he's dealing with a promise, and he's going nuts in Fist of Fury. But there is an innocence about him in Way of the Dragon.
Yeah, and I mean, he even sort of grasps the basic understanding of setting up a humorous scene, doesn't it? I mean, when I think the niece that sort of brings him back from the airport, when she's saying about just smile at people when they smile back, and she's sort of doing everything that the gal's saying.
Yeah.
It's just funny.
He's brilliant. But then he studied film, so he had
Yeah.
all this knowledge that he could bring to it, and it's perfection. Right? It's overshadowed though by Enter the Dragon though,
Yeah.
which was Big Bruce as a star, even though it's John Saxon and I will just pull this one up.
Oh, the guy that plays Williams.
Yeah.
What's his name now? He's in a lot of blaxploitation films, isn't he?
Yeah. Jim Kelly.
Jim Kelly, that's it.
Jim
yeah.
Kelly.
Yeah.
And
I think as well, because this was the first sort of, it was helmed by Warner Brothers, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
So I think it was like the first big, I don't know if it was wholly American, but like it was the first one that was designed specifically to be shown in American markets, wasn't it? I mean, Bruce speaks in his natural voice in this, which actually he has a really good English accent, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, he speaks really well. Like there was nothing. It was never to do with the fact that he didn't speak English.
That's because he was Asian.
Yeah, I mean, you can tell as well because there's like a lot of American actors in it as well, and English as well. But it's basically, it reminds me a lot of Man with a Golden Gun for some reason. I mean, a lunatic living on an island, and it's quite James Bondish, isn't it?
You basically just took off a half of my notes now.
Oh, sorry.
It's yeah, it is. I mean, there's so much James Bond. I mean, this was the first actually American Chinese co-production.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the links to Bond, so it is Bruce Lee could be James Bond, and it does. It feels like you said, Man with the Golden Gun. I mean, Mr. Han is definitely a Bond villain. He's got the one hand like Doctor. He got the hand like Doctor No. He got the costume like Blofeld. He got the white cat.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think they were sort of definitely going with an easier way for Americans to get into it, weren't they? Like, because even at the beginning, there's like a briefing scene with like quote quote M, isn't there? Like the English guy that works at MI6, and it even when I was younger, I could recognize the parallels. Like, it was an easier way to get people into the martial arts thing if they knew it was something familiar already.
And he's on a mission. It's like the start. He's when we're introduced to Bruce Lee's character, he's actually you could say that he's on a mission because he's and then he gets pulled into it. It's very that the whole pre-credit sequence of James Bond. Then you got the story. It's such a it is very Bond, and that's what the ease of the appeal is, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, there's almost like a point where you can tell, because I think Golden Harvest they co-produced it, didn't they?
Yeah.
So there's like, you can tell the bits that Warner have done, and you can tell the bits that Golden Harvest have done, because like the opening scene where he fights a young Sammo Hung in the ring at the beginning.
Apparently, I mean, I saw that was, and this only recently, that he directed that bit after the Americans had gone home, just so that they could add it in, because he wanted it to make
right.
so that by the opening sequence, the whole Sammo Hung thing, he's the star.
Yeah.
Not the other two. He's the star because he's having the opening scene. And
after
the crew went home.
There's even like an opening scene like Bond, isn't there? I just didn't even think of that. But I think you get, like, those scenes, the more sort of Eastern Zen scenes, like where he talks to that young fella about he's like, let me think, and he slaps him on the head.
Yeah.
That's all the sort of the philosophy of the martial arts side of it, isn't it? And this flashback about his sister getting killed and stuff like that. Oh well, she kills herself, doesn't she? But then there's that absolute paradigm shift, isn't there? To here's the Americans and here's the mission and here's John Saxon and Jim Kelly. Like it's that's the point where you can think Warner of sort of, that's their part, isn't it?
Yeah, because they've got enough material that if this does play out, they can just re-edit it and get one element out of the film or turn it into a secondary character. because that way you've got Jim Kelly and John Saxon who can literally rein it in.
Yeah, I mean, I always remember, because I saw it after Nightmare on Elm Street, I was always like, oh, it's Nancy's dad.
Yeah, I was the same. But he's actually good. Him and
He is good.
John Saxon and Jim Kelly are good. They're like a good double act.
Yeah, John Saxon's like a pussy magnet in that film, isn't he?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the amount of... He's just so cool in it.
Well, look at Jim Kelly when he gets all those women, and it's sort of like,
Yeah,
I'll have that one, that one, that one, and that one. But another thing with the women, it's sort of like how you've got the undercover woman, or it is
Yeah,
already
yeah.
infiltrated. Again, James Bond.
Is it Mei Ling? Is that her name? Or something like that, isn't it?
Yeah. And you got his mate Robert Wall as well, being the guy that
Yeah.
the guy that does the dishonors him.
O'Hara.
Yeah. And yeah, and you've got the whole Pai Mei style character at the start.
Yes. Oh, the guy's I think he's in charge of the temple, isn't he, or
Yeah.
something like that. But that, I think that whole scene where he talks to him, unless I'm mistaken, that I don't remember that being in the video. I'm sure there was a couple of scenes when I got it on DVD and later Blu-ray, where I was like, that wasn't. I don't remember that scene. I don't know whether it's just because I don't remember them, or I do remember a lot of his films were cut, weren't they?
Yeah. They had to, because they didn't like anything that could be emulated.
Yeah.
It's crazy. We got given half-assed versions. I mean, nowadays, once a film's out in one market, it's hard to keep it in that market, because if people know of alternative cuts, they will seek out the alternative cuts.
Well, it's almost sort of a cliche marketing strategy now, isn't it? Like, here's the DVD with the director's cut. Like it. I mean, that's all that happens now, really, isn't it?
It's very, especially when they want to sell more copies, especially down the line, like The Hobbit or Lord of the Rings. Here they are. You bought them now. You got to buy this edition as well because you've got the extra couple of hours on it.
Yeah. Or if you're George Lucas, just change completely scenes.
Yeah, he doesn't do that anymore. It's now Mouse House, and they still haven't released the theatrical cuts.
No.
But Bruce Lee dresses. He knows how another way that signifies that he is the hero is he dresses completely different to everybody else.
Yeah, he sort of dresses like the similar way he does in the other films, doesn't he? Whereas I do like the scene where he's dressed in that sort of black, sort of secret agent outfit.
Yeah.
That's the only time I've ever seen him in the closest to a Western outfit, I suppose.
Yeah, but when he's fighting everybody else and he's been given that suit to wear, he refuses to wear it. Where even Roper and Williams, they adhere to what they've been told to do.
Yeah.
But he doesn't know, because Bruce Lee, he was doing whatever he could to signify that it's my vehicle, I'm the hero, people are going to watch me. And it's just brilliant how he puts himself across.
Yeah, I mean, I get the impression that like John Saxon and Jim Kelly weren't sort of like, oh, it's my like dog in the limelight. I think that it looks like they all had a good sort of like fun making it.
Yeah.
And from interviews afterwards, John Saxon said it was one of the best roles he ever took.
And I love the bit at the start, and and I love how Bruce gets his philosophies into his films about how my art of fighting is my style is fighting without fighting, and he gets that guy to go out on a boat, and it's like, yeah, Bruce is now putting more of his teachings into the films. I mean, he did in some of the others, but
they do come across, don't they? Because I mean, the only thing you want to happen is for that guy to get his ass kicked.
Yeah.
But he sort of doesn't. He just sort of humiliates him instead. I mean, he does get his ass kicked later, doesn't he? I think it's by Roper, isn't it? He fights John Saxon and Jim Kelly. I can't remember which one it is, and he gets sort of beaten because it's like a tournament, isn't it?
It is.
And I think that's definitely stolen by Mortal Kombat, isn't it?
Yeah.
The whole island with a crazy old man on it, and yeah, it's definitely the end of the dragon.
And of course there's the whole James Bond. You can also argue at the end of Street Fighter, where You got the army that comes in at the end, like they all do
Yeah.
at the end of Street Fighter the movie.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, yeah.
But
And I mean, you even like we were saying about Han being like a Bond villain, and Williams even says to him, doesn't he? You come right out of a comic book,
yeah,
and like they're acknowledging that he's a kind of silly villain, isn't he?
it is. It works. It does.
That's why it's such a shame that Bruce was taken from us so early, because I would love to have seen more Western films where he does, you know, more serious stuff and goes back to his old style of being like the villains weren't sort of hokey and stupid. They were quite scary and they were quite formidable.
But you know, this was a needed crossover movie. I mean, I could imagine Bruce Lee actually returning for Enter the Dragon 2.
Oh, so can I, yeah, definitely.
And you know, that would have been a franchise in itself.
Yeah.
It would have, but you know, he died 3 weeks before the release of Enter the Dragon.
Oh, was it that early?
Yeah, he died. It was released in the US just 3 weeks after his death. So
1974, was it?
73.
Oh, was it 3? Oh, I thought it was 4.
73. So you know, it's in those 4 films. You've got his legacy.
Yeah.
That's
essentially. I mean, it's whenever people say like which film do I get into if I want to get into Bruce Lee, I just think there's only 4, so any of them.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's only 4 real ones, isn't there? Game of Death is kind of like a sideshow curiosity, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. One thing we haven't, we haven't touched on yet is something that I noticed that, some of the Chinese actors that are in the film they've been dubbed in English. So
yes,
I'm of the impression that there was probably a version of the film that goes out to the Eastern audience that actually does have the Americans dubbed. So being a joint production, it's and I thought that was a fantastic. That was fantastic. Hitting 2 audiences at one time.
Yeah, that was the genius of it, wasn't it? I mean, you could tell it was going to be the vehicle that made him household name, and it was. Indeed, I think it again because he died. Obviously, it was the last thing we had from him, wasn't it? But you can definitely tell they were going full throttle for both markets to get it as famous as possible, wasn't it?
And they got it right.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's kind of the synthesis of all of his films up to that point for me. That's why it's always the cliche favorite, and I do apologize for having the cliche favorite, but it's like the perfect synthesis of all the other films built into what he could have, but what he did do eventually as the last thing, wasn't it?
They got it perfect, and where he would have gone after that, would have been,
anyone's guess.
I think he would have been a director, but I'm going to leave that till a bit later. So
I mean, I always think like what could have been like. Imagine a Bruce Lee Steven Seagal film, or Bruce Lee Van Damme. It would just be like the possibilities are endless, aren't they?
Definitely. I mean, I would have Seagal back in today. Seagal's ego wouldn't have let him be beat by Bruce Lee. Anybody. He wouldn't. Do you want to end part 1 here?
Yeah, I think it's probably a perfect point, isn't it? Because I mean, we can sort of tie Game of Death into
part 2,
his death and his legacy and that, can't we?
Yeah. So this is part 1. Coming up, part 2
to be continued.